Every day, from the moment we wake up, we are casting votes for the kind of person we wish to become. The way we start our mornings, the effort we put into our work, how we treat people around us, these aren't just actions. They are silent declarations of identity. Greatness doesn't arrive overnight. It's not the result of one big opportunity. It's the outcome of countless small choices made consistently. Think about it. The athlete who wins gold didn't become a champion the day of the race. They became a champion in the quiet hours of early morning training when no one was cheering and quitting seemed easier than continuing. What we do repeatedly carves pathways in our character. Each decision, each habit, each moment of discipline builds a framework of who we are becoming. When we procrastinate daily, we don't just delay tasks. We train ourselves to accept less than our potential. But when we push forward daily, even in small steps, we train our minds to believe that progress is possible. There's something powerful about ordinary routines done with extraordinary purpose. The writer who writes a page a day becomes an author. The student who studies a little every night becomes a scholar. The leader who listens every day becomes wise. It's not the size of the action. It's the consistency behind it. And that's the truth most people miss. We wait for motivation to act, not realizing that action creates motivation. We wait for clarity, not realizing that clarity comes from movement. The transformation doesn't begin when the world notices. It begins when we do. So ask yourself, what are you practicing every day? Because practice, whether intentional or not, makes permanent. Every repeated behavior becomes part of your identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. And your habits, the things you do daily, are the seeds of who you are destined to become. So choose your daily actions wisely, because in the end, what you do every day isn't just what you do, it's who you are becoming. Consistency is the quiet force that shapes everything we become. It is not glamorous, it doesn't always feel exciting, and it rarely delivers instant rewards. Yet, it is the most reliable architect of success and personal growth. Every great accomplishment, every admirable trait, and every meaningful change begins with a single, repeated action, done consistently over time. What we do once might spark momentum, but what we do every day creates transformation. When we look closely at people who seem naturally talented or effortlessly successful, we often overlook the years of repetition that built their skill. The musician who plays flawlessly on stage has practiced the same notes thousands of times. The speaker who inspires a crowd has rehearsed, refined, and failed repeatedly before finding their voice. The difference between potential and achievement lies not in brilliance, but in persistence. Consistency turns possibility into reality. In education, this idea is reflected in how learning truly works. A student who studies for 15 minutes daily often retains more than one who crams for hours before an exam. The brain thrives on repetition and familiarity. It learns best through consistent engagement. Knowledge doesn't settle in the mind through intensity, it settles through continuity. Likewise, personal development isn't about sudden leaps. It's about steady, deliberate steps taken again and again. Consistency also builds trust, not just with others, but within ourselves. Every time we follow through on what we said we would do, we reinforce our sense of reliability and self-discipline. We begin to believe in our own word. This self-trust becomes the foundation of confidence. On the other hand, when we constantly break small commitments to ourselves, skipping the workout, delaying the reading, ignoring the goal, we silently tell ourselves that our promises don't matter. Over time, this weakens our inner integrity and our belief in what we can achieve. The psychology behind consistency is deeply connected to habit formation. Our brains are designed to seek patterns and efficiency. When we repeat an action regularly, the brain wires it into an automatic behavior to save energy. This is why consistency is so powerful. It reduces the need for willpower over time. In the beginning, it takes effort to start, but once the pattern is established, the action becomes natural. What once felt difficult becomes part of who we are. The The daily practice of showing up slowly shifts identity. We no longer just do productive things, we become a productive person. There is also a compounding effect that consistency creates, similar to compound interest in finance. Just as small, steady investments grow exponentially over time, small, steady actions yield significant results when accumulated. Reading 10 pages a day may not seem like much, but it adds up to over 500 pages a year, equivalent to about 15 books. Writing a few lines each morning might not feel productive, but within months it becomes a manuscript. These small, consistent behaviors multiply in power because time amplifies them. Consistency also provides clarity. Through repetition, we learn what works and what doesn't. It's only when we commit to a process over time that patterns become visible. A teacher can refine their method only after teaching regularly and observing the results. An athlete can adjust their training plan only after weeks of consistent effort. Sporadic action doesn't produce enough feedback to grow from. Consistency gives us the data, the insight, and the perspective needed for continuous improvement. But maintaining consistency is not easy, and this is where discipline enters the picture. There will always be days when motivation fades, when results seem invisible, and when effort feels unappreciated. In those moments, consistency becomes an act of faith. It requires trusting the process when outcomes are not yet visible. True growth often happens in the invisible stages, beneath the surface, where we can't yet see the progress being made. Just as seeds germinate underground before breaking through the soil, our consistent actions prepare us for visible success long before it appears. Another important dimension of consistency is its relationship to focus. When we spread our attention across too many goals, our progress becomes fragmented. Consistency works best when directed towards specific, meaningful areas. It's not about doing everything every day, it's about doing the right things every day. Even 5 minutes of focused practice, repeated daily, is more transformative than hours of scattered effort. Consistency also communicates value. Whatever we commit to regularly becomes a statement of what we prioritize. If we consistently spend time learning, we are saying that growth matters. If we consistently care for our health, we are saying that well-being matters. Every consistent act reinforces our values and aligns our actions with our intentions. This alignment between intention and behavior is what creates authenticity, a state where what we say, believe, and do are in harmony. Ultimately, consistency is the bridge between goals and identity. It takes dreams that exist only in the mind and translates them into habits that shape reality. It teaches us that success is not a sudden event, but a gradual evolution. Every day we act consistently, we move closer to the person we are capable of becoming. The power of consistency lies not just in repetition, but in meaning. It's not about doing the same thing endlessly, it's about doing what matters deeply, again and again, until it becomes a natural expression of who we are. Discipline is the silent architect of identity. It is the bridge between intention and execution, the force that turns a person's vision into lived reality. While motivation sparks the beginning of a journey, discipline sustains it when the spark fades. It is the ability to act according to values and commitments, not feelings or moods. Through discipline, we transform from people who wish to change into people who do change, shaping our identity with every consistent act of self-control. Discipline is not about punishment or restriction. It is about alignment. It means bringing our daily actions into harmony with the person we aspire to be. Every time we choose to follow through on a task, even when it's inconvenient, we cast a vote for that version of ourselves. Over time, those votes accumulate and solidify into identity. A disciplined writer becomes an author not by sudden inspiration, but by showing up each morning to face the blank page. A disciplined student becomes a scholar not because of raw intelligence, but because of the habit of focus built day after day. Identity is not a fixed trait, it is a living reflection of our repeated behavior. Discipline molds this reflection by shaping what we prioritize and how we respond to challenges. It is easy to act according to our goals when conditions are perfect, but true discipline appears when circumstances are not. The athlete who trains in the rain, the entrepreneur who continues after a failure, the learner who studies after a long day, all demonstrate that identity is forged in moments of resistance. It is in those moments that we define who we are, not by how we feel, but by what we do despite how we feel. Discipline also operates as a form of self-respect. When we keep promises to ourselves, we communicate that our goals matter and that our word carries weight. This internal trust builds a stronger sense of self-worth. Conversely, every time we neglect what we said we'd do, we weaken that trust, teaching our subconscious that our intentions are negotiable. Discipline, then, is not about external control, it is about internal integrity. It ensures that our actions reflect our principles, and in doing so, strengthens the foundation of our character. From a psychological perspective, discipline is a learned skill, not an innate gift. The brain is wired to seek comfort and avoid discomfort, but through disciplined repetition, we reprogram this instinct. Each time we choose effort over ease, we create neural pathways that make disciplined behavior more automatic. Over time, this rewiring changes our default responses. We begin to act in alignment with long-term values instead of short-term impulses. What was once a struggle becomes part of our identity. We don't just try to be disciplined, we are disciplined. Discipline is deeply intertwined with freedom. Although it might seem like structure limits choice, in reality it expands it. A disciplined person is free from the chaos of indecision, procrastination, and regret. The student who studies regularly has the freedom to approach exams without anxiety. The professional who manages time with discipline enjoys the freedom to rest without guilt. Discipline eliminates the noise of constant internal negotiation. It creates clarity. It allows us to live intentionally instead of reactively. The role of discipline in mastery is undeniable. Excellence in any field, music, science, art, leadership, demands repeated, focused practice over time. Natural talent may open the door, but discipline keeps it open. It ensures that effort is sustained long enough for skill to compound. The disciplined mind learns to find satisfaction in progress, not perfection. It values the process as much as the outcome. This shift in focus from results to consistency is what differentiates amateurs from professionals. Discipline also functions as a stabilizing force amid emotional turbulence. Human emotions are unpredictable. They rise and fall with circumstances. Without discipline, our productivity and purpose rise and fall with them. Discipline acts as a compass, guiding behavior even when feelings fluctuate. It allows us to continue moving forward when enthusiasm disappears. In this way, discipline is less about constant motivation and more about quiet perseverance. It is the steady rhythm beneath the noise of life. Discipline nurtures patience, the recognition that growth unfolds in its own time. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, discipline teaches the value of delayed rewards. The person who practices discipline learns to invest in the unseen stages of development, trusting that consistent effort will yield eventual results. This mindset builds resilience because when progress is slow, discipline reminds us that persistence itself is progress. Another vital aspect of discipline is intentional focus. It demands that we choose what deserves our attention and what does not. Every yes to discipline requires a no to distraction. In this sense, discipline is not only about doing more, it is about doing what matters most. It filters out the unnecessary, helping us channel energy into meaningful pursuits. Through this filtering, identity becomes clearer. We no longer define ourselves by scattered activity, but by deliberate purpose. Discipline also builds credibility, not just externally, but internally. Others begin to trust and respect those who are dependable, but more importantly, we begin to trust ourselves. That self-trust becomes a source of quiet power. We no longer depend on external validation because our consistency becomes evidence of our worth. We know who we are because our actions prove it every day. Discipline is not about rigid control, it is about conscious creation. It is the ongoing choice to align actions with values, to act even when it's difficult, and to persist even when the outcome is uncertain. Through this steady practice, discipline doesn't just change what we do, it changes who we are. Every disciplined act sculpts identity, revealing the person capable of living the life we aspire to build. Progress is rarely visible in the moment. It moves quietly, often hidden beneath the surface of daily effort, revealing itself only after time has passed. The human mind tends to seek immediate results, but true growth does not follow a linear or predictable pattern. It builds gradually, accumulating in small increments that seem insignificant day by day, but powerful in hindsight. The most meaningful transformations occur long before they can be seen, much like the roots of a tree that strengthen underground before the first leaves appear. Invisible progress is the essence of patience and perseverance. When we commit to a goal, learning a skill, improving a habit, or developing character, the initial stages often feel unrewarding. The effort seems disproportionate to the outcome. We work, but the results don't yet reflect the energy we invest. This stage tests commitment more than ability. Those who understand that progress is often invisible in its early stages persist long enough to reach the moment when it becomes visible to others. Every great achievement hides a long period of silent work. The athlete who wins a medal has endured years of training sessions no one saw. The scientist who makes a discovery has faced countless experiments that failed before one succeeded. The artist who presents a masterpiece has spent hours refining details that others might overlook. What appears as sudden success is, in truth, the visible tip of an invisible mountain of effort. The world celebrates the outcome, but it is the unseen persistence that makes it possible. Invisible progress also occurs in the way we think and respond to challenges. Each time we face difficulty with patience, our emotional endurance strengthens. Each moment we choose discipline over distraction, we reinforce mental resilience. These internal shifts are subtle, and because they don't come with visible markers, we often underestimate them. Yet, they form the invisible foundation of growth, the kind that changes not just what we can do, but who we are becoming. In education and learning, invisible progress is particularly evident. When a student studies consistently, comprehension may not seem to improve instantly. Yet beneath the surface, the brain is organizing information, building neural connections, and strengthening memory pathways. Days or weeks later, understanding suddenly clicks, as though the knowledge appeared out of nowhere. In reality, it was being constructed silently through invisible effort. Learning, like growth, has a delayed visibility. The results show only after repeated exposure and reflection. Invisible progress is also deeply connected to the concept of compounding. Just as compound interest turns small, consistent investments into significant wealth, small, consistent actions accumulate into remarkable achievements. However, in the early stages of compounding, whether financial or personal, the growth curve is almost flat. It appears as though nothing is happening. This illusion of stagnation discourages many from continuing. Those who persist long enough to reach the point of visible acceleration experience exponential growth. The difference between those who stop and those who succeed lies in faith in the unseen process. Patience is the natural companion of invisible progress. Without it, we fall into the trap of judging success too early. We measure our value by immediate results, not realizing that meaningful progress follows its own rhythm. The process of development, whether personal or professional, cannot be rushed. Just as a seed cannot be forced to sprout faster by constant digging, progress cannot be accelerated by impatience. Growth requires trust in time and consistency. Invisible progress also teaches humility. It reminds us that progress is not always meant to be displayed. Some of the most profound forms of growth happen internally, in perspective, empathy, self-control, and awareness. These qualities may not attract attention, but they transform the quality of one's life and relationships. The individual who practices kindness daily, even when unnoticed, becomes more compassionate. The leader who listens consistently, even without recognition, becomes more wise. The teacher who patiently nurtures students shapes lives in ways that may never be publicly acknowledged. The absence of visibility does not mean the absence of impact. This concept also challenges modern culture's obsession with speed and visibility. We live in a world where people showcase results instantly, leading others to believe that progress is fast and effortless. Yet, behind every success story lies years of invisible persistence. The danger of comparing one's hidden process to another's visible outcome is that it breeds discouragement. Understanding invisible progress helps counter this illusion. It allows us to focus on process over performance and effort over evidence. Invisible progress is not just about results, it's about transformation through repetition. Every time we practice a skill, we reinforce neural circuits. Every time we make a responsible choice, we strengthen willpower. Each small action becomes a building block of the person we are becoming. Even when there is no external proof, something internal is shifting. Growth is often quiet because it is internal first and external later. Invisible progress also builds character through delayed gratification. When we continue working without applause, we develop resilience, focus, and intrinsic motivation. We learn to find satisfaction in the act of doing rather than in the validation of outcomes. This mindset shift turns work into purpose. The ability to persist without recognition is one of the highest forms of maturity because it is driven by vision, not vanity. Invisible progress creates lasting change because it is rooted in authenticity. Visible success can be imitated, invisible growth cannot. It is built through personal struggle, reflection, and discipline. It cannot be borrowed, copied, or faked. The invisible work we do on ourselves, cultivating integrity, sharpening discipline, expanding understanding, forms the truest version of success. Invisible progress reminds us that growth is not always about what others can see. It is about what we quietly become in the process. It teaches that persistence matters more than recognition and that the work done in silence is often the foundation of the loudest achievements. The distinction between becoming and doing defines the difference between temporary effort and lasting transformation. Doing refers to the actions we perform, the visible tasks, the measurable results, the things we accomplish in the short term. Becoming, on the other hand, refers to the identity we cultivate through those actions, the kind of person we evolve into as a result of our consistent behavior. What we repeatedly do reshapes our mindset, character, and values until the actions are no longer external tasks, but internal traits. Doing is activity-driven, becoming is identity-driven. A person can perform an action once without change, but repetition transforms that action into part of their identity. For example, someone who exercises once is doing a workout. Someone who exercises daily becomes an active person. The first requires motivation, while the second flows from identity. The transition from doing to becoming happens through repetition, reflection, and consistency, when effort transforms from a task into a habit and from a habit into a defining trait. Becoming is the deeper layer of growth. It moves beyond behavior to shape beliefs and values. Every time we act, we send a message to ourselves about who we are. When we choose honesty repeatedly, we start to see ourselves as trustworthy. When we choose focus over distraction, we become disciplined. These small acts accumulate, and over time, our actions sculpt our sense of self. We are constantly in the process of becoming what we do most often, whether consciously or not. In psychology, This relationship between behavior and identity is called the feedback loop of habit formation. Each action reinforces a belief, and each belief strengthens the likelihood of repeating the action. For instance, if a person studies consistently, they begin to view themselves as a learner. That identity then motivates further studying, reinforcing the behavior. In this way, doing and becoming feed each other in a continuous cycle. The more we act in alignment with a desired identity, the stronger that identity becomes, and the easier it is to act in accordance with it again. Doing without becoming is unsustainable. When people focus only on outcomes, achieving goals, completing tasks, or chasing rewards, they may succeed temporarily, but the change does not last. Without identity behind it, motivation fades. For example, someone might go on a strict diet to lose weight, but return to old habits afterward because they never became the kind of person who values health. Lasting transformation happens when goals shift from external achievement to internal embodiment. When we stop asking, "What do I want to achieve?" and start asking, "Who do I want to become?" our actions take on deeper meaning. Becoming also transforms our relationship with effort. When we identify with what we do, discipline feels natural instead of forced. The artist who sees themselves as creative doesn't wait for inspiration. They create because it's who they are. The teacher who sees themselves as a lifelong learner continues studying without external pressure. Identity creates consistency because it aligns behavior with belief. When what we do reflects who we think we are, effort becomes expression. This concept also applies to leadership and personal influence. A leader who only does leadership tasks, delegating, directing, or managing, may achieve short-term success, but a leader who becomes a leader through character, empathy, and integrity inspires lasting trust. Becoming changes how others experience us. People respond not to what we do occasionally, but to who we consistently are. The authenticity that emerges from becoming gives credibility to our actions. In education, the shift from doing to becoming defines mastery. A student who memorizes facts is doing. A student who learns to think critically and apply knowledge is becoming. The same principle applies in every domain. Doing focuses on performance, becoming focuses on understanding and integration. When learning becomes part of one's identity, knowledge ceases to be something possessed. It becomes something lived. Becoming is also deeply connected to purpose. Doing can be driven by external factors, approval, competition, obligation, but becoming arises from internal conviction. It requires alignment between actions and values. When our actions are consistent with what we believe, we move beyond success into fulfillment. Purpose-driven becoming transforms work from a means to an end into a meaningful expression of self. It shifts our focus from external validation to internal growth. The process of becoming also demands patience because identity does not shift overnight. It takes consistent repetition of action before it feels authentic. At first, the new behavior feels uncomfortable, even unnatural. Over time, through continued practice, the new pattern integrates into identity. The person who once forced themselves to wake up early eventually becomes someone who simply does. What begins as discipline becomes instinct. Becoming is not only about positive growth, it can also work in the opposite direction. Repeated negative behaviors, even small ones, can slowly shape undesirable identities. Someone who frequently avoids responsibility may begin to see themselves as incapable. Someone who consistently breaks promises might internalize the belief that they are unreliable. The same mechanism that builds excellence can also build mediocrity, depending on what is practiced. This understanding underscores the importance of conscious choosing daily actions that align with the person we aspire to become. The difference between doing and becoming also lies in longevity. Doing produces temporary results, while becoming produces transformation that endures. When a behavior is anchored in identity, it remains even when circumstances change. For example, a person who does kind acts occasionally may stop when unappreciated, but someone who is kind continues regardless of recognition. Identity-based actions are stable because they are internally motivated. Becoming through doing also brings a sense of harmony between thought and action. When we act consistently with who we want to be, we experience integrity. This internal alignment generates confidence because there is no conflict between what we claim to value and what we actually do. It eliminates the gap between intention and execution. The person who practices honesty daily no longer has to decide whether to tell the truth. It becomes instinctive. Ultimately, the journey from doing to becoming is the process of turning effort into identity. Every repeated action reinforces the person we are becoming. The writer becomes a storyteller, the learner becomes a thinker, the disciplined becomes a master, doing creates motion, becoming creates meaning. Through daily repetition, the external act merges with the internal self, until there is no separation between what we do and who we are.